Hey everybody, this is Mr. Marshall at Stony Lane. And did you know that Abraham Lincoln, who's one of the most famous presidents ever, has relatives? And one of his relatives is a good friend of mine, and he's right here. This is Andrew Lincoln. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, how are you guys? My name is Andrew Lincoln, and yes, it is correct what Mr. Marshall said. I am, in fact, a relative of the President Abraham Lincoln.
That's awesome. So where do you live? What do you do?
So I live in the state of Maryland, and I am actually a musician. So I'm not doing anything political like President Lincoln.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And what kind of music do you play?
I actually do vocal music and I play piano as well.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know if Abraham Lincoln did that? Did he know how to play music?
I don't think that Abraham Lincoln was a musician, so I'm not sure that I inherited that from him. But he definitely was an appreciator of music for sure.
That's awesome. So Abraham Lincoln is like one of the most famous people in the world, right? And
Absolutely.
he was a president of the United States and a great one. And his face is on the penny and on the $5 bill, and there's things named after him, towns and cars and tunnels and everything. And so when you found out that you were related to Abraham Lincoln, what was that like?
Well, it's really interesting that you say that. The name is everywhere, right? We see it on even street signs too. Almost any town you go into, they've got Lincoln as a street sign. And so as a kid, we're going around and I'm seeing my name everywhere and I'm wondering why that is. And finally, someone told me it's actually because one of the presidents is your relative. And that was a really cool moment for me to realize, wow, I'm related to somebody that important in American history. That was very exciting for me. And oftentimes in school, teachers would always say to me, "Do you know how special this last name is?" Anytime they would say my name to call attendance, for example, in the beginning of class.
That's really cool. That's really cool. It's nice to know that you have something special about you, right? So, can you tell us a little bit about what you might know? Because a lot of people know a lot of things about the important things that Abraham Lincoln did as president and some of the things that he was involved in the Civil War and freeing the slaves and things like that. But a lot of people don't know about what his life was like before that. Do you have any stories that are either just funny or just important for us to know
Oh,
about what kind of person he was?
well, you're in luck because there are many very funny and very interesting stories about Abraham Lincoln before he was president, before anybody really knew who he was. So, something that's really interesting about Lincoln that I'm sure you all have noticed is that Lincoln was very, very tall. By the time he was 18 years old, he was already 6 feet 4 inches. And his mother used to say when he was a teenager that Abraham is so tall that he can leave footprints on the ceiling, which obviously is a really silly thing to say, but he thought that was hilarious. So one day he decided to play a joke on his mother. And when she was out, he went to his younger siblings and told them to run outside in the mud. And so they went outside in the mud and they got their feet and their shoes all dirty, covered in mud. And when they came back in, Abraham picked them up one by one, upside down, and had them walk across the ceiling with their muddy footprints. And so they got mud prints all over the ceiling. And when Abraham's mother came home, she saw these footprints on the ceiling. And at first, she was a little angry because she knew that was going to be a mess to clean up. And she chased Abraham around with a broom. But she thought it was very funny and it was very, very clever. And Abraham was full of all sorts of really clever jokes and ideas like that.
That's really cool. So Abraham Lincoln, I heard, has a really good sense of humor, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's very cool. Anything else that you know about his childhood or about his adulthood before he was president?
Well, he did have a very, very good best friend when he was young, when he was very little, maybe about 7 or 8 years old. And there's a really interesting story one time about when they were playing outside by the creek, and they were actually trying to cross the creek. And his friend went first. His friend made it across. And this is sort of a deeper part of the creek. And as Lincoln was crossing, he accidentally fell in, and he nor his friend knew how to swim. So his friend was really quick, went and grabbed a very long stick and held it out to Lincoln and said, "Grab on, grab on." And Lincoln grabbed onto the stick and he pulled him to safety. So if it weren't for the bravery and the cleverness of his friend, who knows what would have happened? That might have turned out a little bit differently, but it's always an interesting story.
Wow, that's awesome. All right. So sometimes when we talk about famous people, we think about how during their life they had to overcome challenges, right? They have tough things in their life, and we all have that. But when we think about famous people, it's important to think about what were some of the challenges that they had to overcome when they were younger, right? Do you know anything about that, about how Abraham Lincoln might have had to deal with something hard in his life and how he dealt with it?
Absolutely. You know, we have to think about the fact that at the time when Abraham Lincoln was growing up, this was a really, really long time ago, and the world was very, very different. We're talking no electricity, no cell phones, anything like that. And anything that they had, including their houses, including the carts that they would use to move things around, they had to build themselves. And so Abraham was actually, even as a child and a teenager, doing a lot of manual labor like that and building things, not just for his family, but for other families in the town. And so something that was really challenging for him was that because of all of this, he wasn't really able to go to school. And in order to get an education, he had to basically teach himself. Now, fortunately, Abraham Lincoln really loved to read. It's actually known that he would go around the town and collect books from the neighbors and from whoever he could find any books. He had a King James version of the Bible and read Aesop's Fables, Robinson Crusoe, anything he could get his hands on. And so, in order to make up for the fact that he couldn't go to school, which he really wanted to do, he sought out these books himself and read them himself and taught himself. And that was really important to him.
Wow. And he also did a lot of important things while he was president of the United States. What would you say are some of the most important things that we should know about him?
Well, one of the most important things that we should know about President Lincoln is that if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have been able to free the slaves in the United States. And so this is probably the thing that we remember about him the most. But the overarching thing that was really important to him, and that was that everybody be free and that everybody have the same rights in this country and that we all be united as a people, because it's so important that people are united, that they stick together and that they help each other, because that's how we succeed.
Terrific. So, what would you say is the big lesson of Abraham Lincoln's life that we should all learn and remember?
I think probably the big lesson that we should all learn and remember from Abraham Lincoln is that it is important to support your neighbors and support your friends, because they're people just like you, and you never know how many struggles they're going through or the things that they're facing. And it's really important to stand together.
Wow, that's great. Thank you, Andrew. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Andrew Lincoln, a real live relative of Abraham Lincoln. Thanks for being with us on this channel. And look for more videos. I'll see you next time.